He came home late again, smelling like rain and something floral I didn't recognize. I watched him through the bedroom doorway as he sat on the edge of our bed, phone glowing blue in the darkness, his thumb moving in careful, deliberate swipes, deleting, deleting, deleting. When he finally fell asleep, I held that phone in my hands and found nothing but white space where our life used to be, except for one message buried deep in a folder I didn't even know existed. My name is Elena, and I've been married to Daniel for 9 years. We live in a small coastal town where everyone knows everyone, where the fog rolls in thick every evening and stays until mid morning. Our house sits at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by pine trees and the constant sound of waves you can't quite see. Daniel is a high school teacher, kind, quiet, predictable, or at least that's what I thought. It wasn't the late nights that made me suspicious at first. It was the silence, the way he stopped looking at me when he spoke, the way his phone became a third presence in our marriage. Always face down, always locked, always just out of reach. Coffee was still warm in my hand when I heard the shower turn on upstairs. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always quiet. Daniel left early for work, and I had the house to myself until noon. But that morning, he'd slept in. Said he had a late start. A staff meeting moved to the afternoon. I stood at the kitchen counter watching steam rise from my cup, and that's when I saw it. His phone. Face up. Screen dark. Just sitting there beside the fruit bowl like it had been forgotten. He never forgot his phone. I looked up at the ceiling, heard the water running through the pipes, heard him humming something I didn't recognize, and I thought about all the times over the past few months when he'd excused himself to another room, when he'd angled his screen away from me on the couch, when he'd started sleeping with it under his pillow instead of on the nightstand. I set my coffee down. My hand hovered over the phone for a long time. I'm not the kind of person who looks. I never have been. I trusted Daniel the way you trust gravity, without question, without thought. But something had shifted, something I couldn't name. It was in the way he touched me now, like his hands were apologizing. In the way he said, I love you too quickly, like he was trying to convince himself. I picked up the phone. The screen lit up beneath my thumb. A photo of us from 2 summers ago stared back at me, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling on the beach. We looked happy. We looked like people who still knew each other. I pressed the home button. The passcode screen appeared. 6 digits. I hesitated. My heartbeat felt louder than the water upstairs. Then I typed it in. Our anniversary. August 14th, 2016. The same code he'd used since the day we got married. It unlocked. I exhaled. For a second, I just stood there staring at his home screen. All those little app icons in neat rows, messages, photos, email, everything looked normal. Everything looked like Daniel. But my hands were shaking. I opened his messages, and that's when I felt it. That strange, weightless feeling you get when you step off a curb you didn't see coming. The inbox was almost empty. Not empty like he didn't use it, empty like someone had gone through and erased things. Carefully, deliberately. There was a message from his dentist about an appointment, one from the school district about payroll, a 2-day-old thread between us where I'd asked him to pick up milk and he'd sent back a thumbs up emoji. That was it. No conversations with coworkers, no thread with his brother, even though they texted almost every day, no group chat with his friends from college, no back and forth with his mom, nothing. I scrolled up. All of our messages, months and months of good mornings and what do you want for dinner and I miss yous, had been deleted back to last week. I stood there, the phone cold and smooth in my hand, and felt something crack open inside my chest. It was like walking into our house and finding every piece of furniture gone. The wall's still there, the floor's still there. But everything that made it ours, everything that proved we'd lived here, just vanished. Why would someone do that? Why would someone delete everything? I heard the water shut off upstairs. My heart lurched. I looked down at the phone, then up at the ceiling. Heard the shower curtain slide open. Heard him step out onto the bath mat. I closed the messages, locked the screen, placed the phone back on the counter exactly where it had been, right beside the fruit bowl, face up, just slightly off center. My hands were trembling so badly I had to press them flat against the counter to make them stop. I picked up my coffee, took a sip. It had gone lukewarm. The pipes groaned as Daniel turned off the faucet. I heard his footsteps crossing the bathroom floor, heard the door open. I stared down into my cup, watching the surface ripple from the shaking in my hands. Hey, babe. His voice came from the stairs. Casual, easy, the same voice that used to make me feel safe. I turned. He stood in the doorway in his towel, hair still damp, smiling at me the way he did every morning. But it didn't reach his eyes. It hadn't reached his eyes in a long time. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, I said. Just tired. He crossed the kitchen, dropped a kiss on my forehead. Quick, routine, like checking a box, and reached for his phone. I watched him pick it up, watched him glance at the screen, watched his thumb move across it in that absent, familiar way, unlocking it without even looking. He didn't notice anything different. He didn't notice that I'd been inside. I'm gonna get dressed, he said, already turning toward the stairs. I'll be down in 5. I nodded again. He disappeared upstairs, and I stood there alone in the kitchen, the morning light slanting through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. I looked down at my hands. They were still shaking. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the confusion and the fear, a small voice whispered a question I didn't want to answer. What else has he deleted? The house was very quiet. I set my coffee down and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt safe in my own home. I was chopping vegetables when I heard his car pull into the driveway. The sun had already set. The kitchen windows were dark mirrors reflecting my own face back at me, and beyond that, nothing but the shapes of pine trees disappearing into fog. He was late. Not by much. Maybe 40 minutes. But enough that dinner had gone cold on the stove, and I'd reheated it once already. I heard the car door close, heard his footsteps on the gravel, heard the jingle of keys at the front door. I kept chopping. The door opened, bringing with it the smell of wet earth and salt air. The mist had rolled in thick that evening, the kind that clings to your clothes and seeps into your bones. Hey, he called out. I set down the knife. Hey! He came into the kitchen, shrugging off his jacket. It was damp, darkened at the shoulders. He draped it over the back of a chair and crossed the room toward me. I turned to face him. He smiled, that small, tired smile I used to find comforting, and leaned in to kiss my forehead. That's when I smelled it. Jasmine. Or maybe something sweeter. Floral. Delicate. The kind of scent that lingers on skin long after the bottle's been put away. I didn't wear perfume. I never had. It gave me headaches. Daniel pulled back, already moving toward the sink to wash his hands, and I stood there, frozen, the smell still hanging in the air between us. Long day? I asked. My voice sounded normal, calm, like my heart wasn't suddenly beating in my throat. Yeah, he said, drying his hands on the dish towel. Parent-teacher conferences ran late. I nodded. Right, conferences. He turned on the faucet, letting the water run cold over his hands. I watched him scrub his palms, his fingers, the space between his knuckles. Slow, methodical. How'd they go? I asked. Fine, you know how it is. Same concerns every year. He said it without looking at me. I turned back to the cutting board, picked up the knife, started slicing a carrot into thin, even rounds. That's good, I said quietly. But my mind was somewhere else. Parent-teacher conferences had been last month. October. I remembered because I'd asked Daniel how they went, and he'd complained about a parent who'd argued with him for 20 minutes about their son's grade. It was November now, Thursday, November 7th. There were no conferences. I set the knife down carefully, my hand steadier than I felt. Are you hungry? I asked. I kept dinner warm. Yeah, starving. I served him a plate, roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans, and set it on the table. He sat down, pulled his phone from his pocket, and placed it face down beside his fork. I poured him tea. Earl Grey, 2 sugars, the way he'd taken it since we first met. I sat across from him with my own cup, watching him eat. He didn't look up, just scrolled through something on his phone with one hand while he brought the fork to his mouth with the other. His eyes had that distant look, the one that meant he wasn't really here. I sipped my tea. "How was your day?" he asked, still not looking up. "Quiet." He nodded. We sat in silence. The only sound was the scrape of his fork against the plate and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner. I watched the way his hand kept drifting toward his phone, how his thumb hovered over the screen like a reflex, even when he wasn't using it, how his jaw tightened every time a notification lit up the glass. He used to put his phone away at dinner. He used to ask me about my day and actually wait for the answer. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked up then, met my eyes. "Yeah, why?" I shrugged. "You just seem distracted." He set his fork down, gave me that smile again, the one that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine, just tired." "Okay." I didn't push. He finished eating, carried his plate to the sink, rinsed it, and placed it in the dishwasher. Then he picked up his phone, checked the time, and glanced toward the hallway. "I've got some grading to finish," he said. "I'll be in the office for a bit." I nodded. "Okay." He crossed the kitchen, paused in the doorway, and looked back at me. "Thanks for dinner." "You're welcome." And then he was gone. I sat at the table for a long time after that, holding my tea until it went cold in my hands. From down the hall, I could hear the faint creak of his office chair, the soft click of the door closing, and then a few minutes later, the quiet tapping of keys. Not the heavy, rhythmic tapping of someone grading papers, something lighter, faster, typing. I got up, washed my own plate, wiped down the counters, turned off the lights. By the time I went upstairs, it was past 10. I brushed my teeth, changed into my nightgown, slipped into bed. The house was silent except for that distant sound, tap, 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 coming from his office below. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and tried to remember the last time Daniel had stayed up late grading papers. I couldn't. The tapping continued, soft, steady, relentless. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I lay there, listening. And I thought about the way he'd smelled when he came home, the way he'd lied without hesitation, the way his hand had hovered over his phone like it was the only thing in the room that mattered. I thought about the empty inbox, the deleted messages, the silence where our life used to be. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a question I'd been pushing away for weeks finally surfaced. "Who are you talking to down there?" The house didn't answer. The tapping went on, and I lay there in the dark, listening to my husband become someone I didn't recognize. I watched the ceiling for hours. The shadows moved slowly across the plaster, branches from the pine tree outside our window swaying in the wind. I counted the cracks, traced them with my eyes, tried to make shapes out of them the way you do with clouds. But my mind wouldn't settle. Beside me, Daniel slept, his breathing deep and even, one arm thrown over his pillow, his face turned away from me. He looked peaceful, like a man with nothing to hide. I rolled onto my side and stared at the back of his head, at the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, at the rise and fall of his shoulders. I used to find comfort in that sound, his breathing. It used to make me feel less alone. Now it just made the room feel smaller. The clock on the nightstand read 1:47 a.m. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but all I could see was that empty inbox, all those deleted messages, all that white space where our life used to be. By 2 o'clock, I gave up. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, my bare feet touching the cold hardwood floor. Daniel didn't stir. I stood there for a moment, watching him, making sure he was still asleep. Then I left the room. The hallway was dark. I didn't turn on any lights. I knew this house by heart. Every creak, every corner, every loose floorboard that groaned if you stepped on it wrong. I moved like a ghost, down the stairs, through the kitchen, into the living room. And there it was, Daniel's phone, plugged into the charger on the side table, glowing faintly in the darkness. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I picked it up. The screen lit up beneath my fingers. 2:03 a.m. and that same photo of us from the beach. I looked at our faces, frozen in a moment when we still knew how to smile at each other, and something inside me twisted. I typed in the passcode. August 14th, 2016. It unlocked. For a second, I just stood there holding his whole life in my hands. Then I opened his photos. I scrolled slowly at first. Pictures of the ocean, pictures of the school where he taught, a few screenshots of articles he'd saved. Nothing unusual, nothing that made my stomach drop. But I kept looking. I opened his albums. Favorites, screenshots, receipts, work docs. I clicked through each one, found nothing but boring, ordinary things: expense reports, parking tickets, PDFs of lesson plans. I was about to give up. And then I saw it. At the very bottom of the album list, beneath everything else, was a folder I almost missed. It was titled Archive. I stared at the name. My thumb hovered over it. I glanced back toward the stairs, listened, heard nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the wind outside. I tapped the folder. It opened. Inside was a single image, a screenshot. I opened it, and my breath caught. It was a text message. Not a conversation, just one message, frozen in time. The contact name at the top was just a phone number. No name, no profile picture. The message read, "Same place tomorrow, 9 p.m. Don't bring your ring this time." I read it once, twice, 3 times. The timestamp in the corner said it was from 3 weeks ago, October 17th, a Thursday. I tried to remember that day, tried to remember where Daniel had been, what he'd told me, but I couldn't. The days had started blurring together months ago. I stared at the words until they stopped making sense. Don't bring your ring this time. This time, meaning there had been a first time, meaning he'd worn it before, meaning someone had noticed. I looked down at my own hand, at the thin gold band on my left ring finger, the one Daniel had slipped on 9 years ago, promising me forever. My hands were shaking. I zoomed in on the phone number, trying to memorize it, but my vision was blurring. My chest felt tight. Who was this person? And why had Daniel kept this message when he'd deleted everything else? Why save this one? I backed out of the photo, looked at the folder again. Archive! Like it was something important, something worth preserving. I checked the rest of his phone, his recent calls, his emails, his internet history, but everything else had been wiped clean, scrubbed, erased. This was the only thing left. A breadcrumb, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. I stood there in the living room, the phone glowing in my hands, and felt the world tilt sideways. How long had this been going on? How many times had he gone to the same place? How many times had he taken off his ring? The screen dimmed, then went black. I was left staring at my own reflection in the dark glass, my face pale, my eyes wide, my expression somewhere between disbelief and something I didn't have a name for yet. I locked the phone, placed it back on the charger exactly where it had been. My hands were still trembling. I walked back upstairs, each step careful and silent, and slipped into bed beside my husband. He was still asleep, still breathing deeply, still turned away from me. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling again, and felt the weight of that message pressing down on my chest like a stone. Don't bring your ring this time. I looked over at Daniel, at the man I'd married, the man I thought I knew, and I realized I didn't know him at all. The shadows kept moving across the ceiling, the branches kept swaying, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a door I'd been trying to keep closed finally swung open. I knew what I had to do. I just didn't know if I was ready to see what was on the other side. I didn't tell Daniel I was leaving. I just got dressed, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door while he was still in the shower. The morning was gray and cold, the kind of November morning where the fog never really lifts. I drove into town with the windows cracked, letting the salt air fill the car, trying to clear my head. But all I could see was that message. Don't bring your ring this time. The words had burned themselves into my mind. I'd barely slept. And now, driving past familiar streets and houses I'd seen 1,000 times, everything looked different, unfamiliar, like I was seeing the world through someone else's eyes. I pulled into the parking lot of Pearl's Coffee House. We used to come here every Sunday, Daniel and I, back when we still did things together, back when we still talked. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the lit windows, watching people move inside like shadows in a snow globe. Then I got out. The bell above the door chimed when I walked in. The smell of roasted coffee and cinnamon hit me immediately. Warm, comforting, familiar. I ordered a latte and took it to the corner booth by the back wall, the same booth we used to sit in. The vinyl was cracked in places, patched with duct tape. The table was scarred with initials and coffee rings. And I sat down and wrapped my hands around the cup, but I didn't drink. I just stared at it. I'm trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. The coffee shop hummed quietly around me, low conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. Someone laughed near the counter. I pulled out my phone and looked at the screenshot again, the one I'd taken of Daniel's screen before I put his phone back. The number, the message, the date. I memorized every detail. Then I looked up, and that's when I saw her. A woman sitting alone by the window, mid-30s maybe, dark hair pulled into a loose bun. She wore a gray sweater and had a book open in front of her, but she wasn't reading. She was staring out at the street. Something about her felt wrong. Not wrong like dangerous, wrong like familiar, like I'd seen her before. I watched her for a moment, trying to place her face, trying to remember where I might know her from. And then she looked up. Our eyes met. It was only a second, maybe less. But I saw it, something in her expression that made my stomach drop. Recognition or guilt or both. Her face went pale. She closed her book quickly, too quickly, and reached for her purse. I didn't move. I just watched as she stood, pulled a few bills from her wallet, and dropped them on the table without counting. Her coffee was still half full, steam rising from the cup. She didn't look at me again. She just walked out. The bell chimed as the door swung shut behind her. And I don't know why, I don't know what possessed me, but I stood up, left my latte on the table, and followed her. The cold air hit me the second I stepped outside. I looked left, then right, and saw her, walking fast down the sidewalk, her hands shoved in her pockets, her shoulders hunched against the wind. I kept my distance. She didn't look back at first, just kept walking, her steps quick and purposeful, like she was trying to put as much space between us as possible. But then halfway down the first block, she glanced over her shoulder. Our eyes met again. She turned forward and walked faster. My heart was pounding now. I followed, 1 block, 2 blocks, 3. She glanced back again, nervous now, her eyes wide, and I realized she knew. She knew I was following her. But I didn't stop. At the corner of Main and Fifth, she turned sharply and disappeared into the Binding, a small bookstore tucked between a dry cleaner and a bakery. I waited a few seconds, counted to 10, then I pushed open the door. The smell of old paper and dust filled my lungs. The store was narrow and quiet, shelves packed floor to ceiling with books. A small lamp glowed on the counter, but there was no one behind it. I looked around. The woman was gone. I walked slowly through the aisles past fiction and history and self-help, listening for footsteps, for the creak of floorboards, for anything that might tell me where she'd gone. But the store was silent. I reached the back corner, poetry and classics, and stopped. She wasn't there. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the shelves, the shadows, the narrow spaces between the stacks. Nothing. She'd vanished. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding and leaned against the shelf, my heart still racing. That's when I saw it. On the shelf in front of me, tucked between 2 volumes of Neruda, was a small folded receipt. I pulled it out and it was from Pearls. Dated today. Time-stamped 20 minutes ago. I turned it over and there, scribbled in blue ink on the back, was a phone number. My breath caught. I stared at it, at the hurried handwriting, at the way the numbers slanted slightly to the right, like they'd been written in a rush. This wasn't an accident. She'd left this for me. I looked up, scanning the store again, half expecting to see her watching me from the shadows. But I was alone. The bell above the door chimed. I heard footsteps. The clerk, maybe, coming back from the stockroom. I folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Then I walked out. The fog had thickened while I was inside. The street was empty now, the shops dimmed behind curtains of gray mist. I stood there on the sidewalk, my hand pressed against the receipt in my pocket, and felt the weight of what I'd just found. A phone number, a stranger who ran when she saw me, a message I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. I looked down the street, half hoping to see her one more time, but she was gone, and all I had left were questions I didn't know how to ask. I walked back to my car slowly, the cold seeping through my jacket, and wondered what I'd just stepped into, and whether I'd ever find my way back out. I sat at the kitchen table with the receipt in front of me for 2 hours, just staring at the numbers written in blue ink, at the way they curved and slanted, hurried and uncertain. Outside, the sky was the color of concrete. Rain tapped against the windows in a slow, steady rhythm that matched the beating of my heart. I heard Daniel upstairs, the creak of the bedroom floor, the sound of drawers opening and closing, his footsteps moving from the closet to the bathroom and back again, getting ready for work. Like it was just another Thursday, like everything was normal. I folded the receipt and slipped it into my pocket. When Daniel came downstairs, I was pouring coffee into his travel mug. My hands were steady. My face was calm. "Morning," he said, kissing my cheek without really looking at me. "Morning." He took the mug, checked his phone, grabbed his keys from the hook by the door. "I'll be late tonight," he said. "Faculty meeting." I nodded. "Okay." He paused in the doorway, glancing back at me like he wanted to say something else. But he didn't. He just left. I stood at the window and watched his car disappear down the gravel road, swallowed by the fog and the trees. Then I pulled out the receipt. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I stared at the number for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. What was I doing? What was I about to learn that I couldn't unlearn? But I'd come too far to stop now. I dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I almost hung up. Then, on the fourth ring, someone answered. "Hello?" A woman's voice. Soft. Uncertain. Like she wasn't sure she should have picked up. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat had closed up. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. "Hello?" she said again, more cautious now. I swallowed. "Who is this?" My voice came out smaller than I'd intended, almost a whisper. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, could hear the faint hum of something in the background, a heater maybe, or traffic passing by. Then she spoke. "You must be Elena." The world tilted. My blood went cold. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "How do you know my name?" My voice was shaking now. I couldn't stop it. Another pause. Longer this time. I could feel her hesitation through the phone, could hear the weight of whatever she was about to say pressing down on both of us. "Because he talks about you," she said quietly. "All the time." I closed my eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm—" She stopped, exhaled. "I'm sorry. I didn't know he was still— I thought you two were separating." The words hit me like a fist to the chest. Separating. I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me up. "We're not," I said. "We're not separating." Silence. I could hear the sound of traffic now, distant and muffled, like she was standing near a window or outside somewhere. "He told me you were," she said, and her voice was shaking now too. "He said it was over, that you were just waiting for the right time to make it official." I pressed my hand to my mouth, felt the tears come before I could stop them. "That's not true," I whispered. "None of that is true." She didn't respond. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, trying to pull myself together, trying to breathe. "Who are you?" I asked again. "Please, I need to know." "My name is Iris," she said softly. "I met him last spring, at the college. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was still married. Not like that." I felt something crack open inside my chest. "How long?" I asked. "A few months, maybe 6. I ended it 2 weeks ago when I realized he was lying." 6 months, half a year, while I was making him dinner, while I was sleeping beside him, while I was trying to figure out why he felt so far away. He was with her. "There's more," Iris said, and her voice dropped. "That's why I left you the number. That's why I ran when I saw you." I looked up, my vision blurred with tears. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she hesitated. I don't think I was the only one." The kitchen went silent. Even the rain seemed to stop. "What?" "I found something," she said. "In his jacket, a phone number, a name, Mara. I didn't ask him about it. I ended things. But I think you should know." "Mara." Another name, another woman, another lie. I couldn't breathe. "Meet me," Iris said, her voice urgent now. Please, there's more I need to tell you, things I couldn't say over the phone. I stared at the table, at the coffee mug I'd poured for Daniel, at the receipt with her number on it. Where? I whispered. The pier, the old one past the marina, tomorrow, noon. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay. Elena? Yeah? I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. And then she hung up. I sat there in the empty kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence on the other end. The rain started again, harder this time. I set the phone down on the table and stared at it. Iris? Mara? How many more were there? How many more women had Daniel promised forever to while wearing my ring? I looked down at my hand, at the thin gold band that suddenly felt too tight, and I realized I didn't know my husband at all. I'd been living with a stranger, sleeping beside him, trusting him, loving him, while he built an entire life I knew nothing about. The house creaked around me, the rain drummed against the roof, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the shock and the pain, I felt something else begin to rise. Anger, quiet, cold, unshakable. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not anymore. I got there 20 minutes early, not because I wanted to, because I couldn't sit still anymore. Couldn't stay in that house with the dishes in the sink and the silence pressing down like weather. So I drove. The pier was the kind of place people forgot about. No ice cream stands, no families taking photos, just warped wood and rust-stained railings and the smell of salt and something older. The kind of place where the town ended and the water just kept going. I parked at the edge of the gravel lot and sat there for a minute, hands on the wheel, engine ticking as it cooled. The sun was already halfway down, bleeding orange into the gray. I thought about turning around. I thought about it hard, but I didn't. The wind came off the water in cold, uneven bursts. I walked out onto the pier slowly, my coat pulled tight across my chest, the boards groaning under my boots. There were gulls somewhere, calling to each other in that sharp, lonely way. I stopped about halfway down and leaned against the railing, staring out at the horizon. The water looked heavy, like it was holding something down. I checked my phone. No messages. Just the time glowing back at me like a countdown. I didn't know what I was going to say to her, didn't know what I wanted her to say to me. Part of me hoped she wouldn't show, that I could just stand here until the sun disappeared and then go home and pretend I'd tried. But I knew she'd come, because guilt always shows up. She arrived 10 minutes late. I heard her footsteps before I saw her. Uneven, hesitant, like she was still deciding whether to turn back. I didn't look right away, just kept my eyes on the water, my hands gripping the railing so tight my knuckles ached. When I finally turned, she was standing a few feet away, hands shoved deep in her coat pockets, shoulders hunched against the wind. Her name was Iris. She was younger than me, not by much, maybe 5 years, but enough that I could see it in the way she carried herself. Like she still thought things could be fixed if you just said the right words. Her eyes were red, swollen, like she'd been crying in the car on the way over. She didn't sit down, didn't move closer, just stood there staring out at the same gray water I'd been watching and started talking. I didn't know, she said. Her voice was quiet, thin. Not at first. I didn't say anything, just waited. We met at a faculty mixer, she continued. Last fall. He was funny, charming. He made me feel like I was the only person in the room. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. God, I sound so stupid. You're not stupid, I said, and I meant it. She glanced at me then just for a second before looking away again. He told me his marriage was ending, she said. That you two were already living separate lives. That it was just paperwork at that point. The wind picked up. I felt it cut through my coat, through my skin. We saw each other 6 times, she said. Maybe 7. I don't know. It feels like more. It feels like... She trailed off, shaking her head. I ended it 2 weeks ago. Why? I asked. She swallowed hard. Because I realized he was lying. About you. About everything. Her voice cracked. I didn't want to be the other woman. I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to hate her. I really did. But standing there, watching her try to hold herself together, I couldn't. Because she wasn't the villain. She was just another person Daniel had pulled into his orbit and left spinning. I'm sorry, she said. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't make it better, but I needed you to hear it from me. I nodded slowly. Thank you. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, smudging mascara across her cheek. For a moment, I thought she was going to leave. Thought she'd said what she came to say and that would be it. But then she looked at me again, and something in her expression shifted. There's something else, she said. My stomach dropped. What? She hesitated, the kind of hesitation that feels like a door opening. When I ended things, she said carefully, he didn't fight it, didn't try to convince me to stay. He just accepted it, like it didn't matter. She paused. And then a few days later, I saw him at a coffee shop near campus. I felt my chest tighten. He was with someone, she said. Another woman, younger. They were laughing. He had his hand on her back. The gulls were still calling, the water still moving, but everything else felt frozen. I didn't want to tell you, Iris said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think I wasn't the only one. She left first, said she was sorry again, though I barely heard it. Just watched her walk back down the pier, her figure growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared into the gray. I stayed. The sun was almost gone now, just a thin line of light on the horizon, fading fast. I thought about all the times Daniel had come home late, all the nights he'd said he was grading papers or meeting with students, all the smiles that didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, I thought about how many other irises there might have been, how many I'd never know about. The wind pulled at my hair, at my coat. The water stretched out before me, dark and endless. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like crying. I just felt cold. She handed me the paper just before she left. Didn't say much, just pulled it from her coat pocket, folded small and worn like she'd been carrying it for a while. Her fingers trembled when she pressed it into my palm. I found this in his jacket pocket once, she said. Her voice was barely audible over the wind. I didn't ask. I should have. Then she walked away. And I stood there holding a piece of paper I didn't want to open. The sun was almost gone. Just a thin strip of orange light bleeding into the horizon, turning everything, the water, the pier, my hands, into shadows. I should have left, should have walked back to my car, driven home, let whatever was on that paper stay folded and forgotten. But I didn't. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers stiff from the cold. It was a phone number, written in Daniel's handwriting. I'd know those sharp slanted numbers anywhere. Below it, just one word. Mara. I stared at the name. Mara. I didn't know anyone named Mara. Not a colleague, not a friend, not anyone from our life together. But the area code was local. The wind cut across the pier in cold, relentless waves. I sat down on one of the benches. Weathered wood, bolts rusted through, and pulled my coat tighter. My breath came out in thin clouds that disappeared as soon as they formed. Mara. I said the name out loud just to hear it, to see if it would spark some memory, some connection. Nothing. The gulls had gone quiet. The water moved slow and heavy beneath the pier, lapping at the pilings with a sound like breathing. I looked at the number again. At the careful way Daniel had written it, not hurried, not careless, like it mattered, like she mattered. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking. From the cold, I told myself. Just the cold. I stared at the screen for a long time, at the keypad glowing softly in the dim light. I thought about putting the paper back in my pocket, throwing it into the water, pretending I'd never seen it. But I couldn't, because I needed to know. I needed to know how deep this went, how many names there were, how many phone numbers folded in pockets and saved in contacts and whispered in the dark. So I dialed. My thumb moved across the screen slowly, each number a small betrayal of my own denial. I pressed call, held the phone to my ear. It rang once. The sound felt too loud, too real. Twice. My chest tightened, my stomach turned, and then someone answered. Daniel! Her voice was bright, warm, the kind of voice that smiled when it spoke, the kind of voice that expected him. I couldn't breathe. Daniel, she said again, softer this time, confused. Are you there? I hung up. The phone slipped from my hand. I caught it before it hit the ground, but barely. My fingers felt numb, disconnected. Daniel! She'd said his name like she knew it, like she'd said it before, like it was something familiar, something comfortable. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. I pressed my free hand against my chest, trying to slow it down, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. How many were there? Iris had been one. This Mara, whoever she was, made two. But that voice, that easy, expectant warmth, she wasn't someone he'd met once or twice. She wasn't a mistake. She was someone who answered the phone thinking it was him. I sat there for a long time. The light was gone now. The sky a deep, bruised purple. The water black and endless. I looked at the folded paper still in my hand, Daniel's handwriting staring back at me like an accusation. Mara. I thought about calling back, asking her who she was. How long, how often? But I couldn't. Because I already knew the answer. Too long, too often. I thought about all the nights Daniel had come home late, all the times he'd said he was at the gym, at a meeting, grading papers in his office. I thought about the way he'd started dressing better, the new cologne, the way he'd stopped looking at me when he spoke. I thought about the mornings I'd wake up and he'd already be gone, the weekends he'd say he had to work, the way he'd smile when his phone buzzed and then put it face down on the table. How had I not seen it? Or had I seen it all along and just chose not to? The pier creaked beneath me. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff and aching. The wind had died down, but the cold had settled in deeper, into my bones. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket, picked up my phone and stared at the call log. One call, 4 seconds. I thought about deleting it. Erasing the evidence like that would erase the truth, but it wouldn't. Because the truth was already there, had been there all along, I just hadn't wanted to see it. I walked back down the pier, each step echoed in the silence. Hollow, final. The parking lot was empty except for my car. A single streetlight flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows across the gravel. I unlocked the door and sat in the driver's seat, but I didn't start the engine, just sat there, staring at the dark water through the windshield. Daniel? Her voice played over and over in my head. That warmth, that familiarity. And beneath it, a question I couldn't stop asking. How many more? How many names I didn't know? How many numbers tucked away? How many voices that would say his name like they owned it? I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. The cold seeped through the windows, through my coat, through everything. And for the first time since this all started, I wondered if I'd ever really known him at all. I didn't turn on the lights, just sat there in the dark at the kitchen table, the piece of paper in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something to break. I could hear the clock on the wall, each tick sharp and deliberate, counting down. I'd been sitting there for an hour, maybe longer. Time felt strange, stretched thin, but I wasn't leaving, not until he came home. The sound of his car in the driveway made my stomach drop. I heard the engine cut, the door slam, his footsteps on the porch, heavy, tired like any other night. The key in the lock, the door opening. I held my breath there. He walked into the kitchen and flipped the switch without thinking. The overhead light flooded the room, harsh and sudden. And then he saw me. He froze. Elena? His voice was careful, measured, the way you'd speak to someone standing on a ledge. I didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, my hands flat on the table, staring at him. He looked the same jacket, same face, same man I'd woken up next to for 15 years, but I didn't recognize him anymore. I slid the piece of paper across the table. It made a soft scraping sound against the wood. Daniel's eyes followed it, then landed on the name written in his own handwriting. Mara. His face went pale. Who's Mara? I asked. My voice was calm, too calm, like I was asking about the weather. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. Then he sank into the chair across from me, slow and heavy, like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Just sat there staring at the paper, at the name, at the evidence of something he couldn't deny. The clock kept ticking. "It's not what you think," he said finally. His voice was barely above a whisper. I laughed. It came out sharp and hollow, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. "Then tell me what it is, Daniel," I said. "Because I found Iris. I found the messages. I found the lies." He flinched, like I'd slapped him. "Tell me," I said again, softer this time, almost pleading, because part of me, some small, desperate part, still wanted him to say something that would make this okay, that would explain it all away, but I knew he wouldn't, because there was nothing he could say. His hands were shaking now. He pressed them flat on the table like he was trying to steady himself, trying to find the right words. "I didn't sleep with her," he said. He looked up at me then, eyes red, pleading. "With Mara, I swear it was just talking. Talking." The word hung in the air between us. "Talking," I repeated. He nodded. "I was lonely, Elena. You were always working, always tired, and I just don't." The word came out sharp, hard. He stopped. "Don't you dare blame me for this," I said. My voice cracked. Broke in half. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, loud and ugly in the silence. Daniel reached for me. "Elena, please, don't touch me." He pulled his hand back like I'd burned him. I walked to the sink, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My chest felt tight, too tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Behind me, I heard Daniel shift in his chair. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. "How many?" I asked. "What?" "How many, Daniel?" I turned to face him. "How many phone numbers? How many women? How many times did you sit across from me and lie?" He didn't answer. Couldn't, because we both knew the truth. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said finally. It just, it got away from me. It got away from you." I repeated his words slowly, tasting them, hating them. "That's what you're going with?" I said. "It just happened?" "Elena, you made a choice," I said. "Every single time. You chose to message them, to meet them, to lie to me. Those were choices, Daniel." He looked down at his hands. "I know," he whispered. "Do you?" I asked. "Because you're sitting there acting like this is something that happened to you. Like you're the victim." "I'm not." "Yes, you are," I said. "You're sitting there telling me you were lonely, that I was working too much, that I wasn't giving you enough attention." My voice rose. "Do you have any idea how many nights I came home exhausted and you were already asleep? How many times I tried to talk to you and you were on your phone? How many dinners I made that you didn't show up for?" He didn't look at me. "I was lonely too, Daniel," I said quietly, "but I didn't go looking for someone else." The silence that followed felt like it had weight, heavy, suffocating. Daniel's shoulders slumped, his head dropped into his hands. "I don't know what to say," he said. "Then don't say anything." I walked past him toward the hallway. "Where are you going?" he asked. I stopped, didn't turn around. "Upstairs," I said, "to pack." "Elena, wait." "Don't," I said. "Don't ask me to stay. Don't ask me to forgive you. Not tonight." He didn't follow me, didn't try to stop me, just sat there in the kitchen under the harsh overhead light while I walked away. I made it to the bottom of the stairs before my legs gave out. I sank down onto the third step, my back against the wall, my hands pressed over my mouth to keep the sound in. But it came anyway. A sob, raw and broken, then another and another, until I was shaking with it, drowning in it. 15 years. 15 years of building a life together, of choosing him every single day, of believing in us. And he'd thrown it away. For what? For talking? For loneliness? For someone named Mara? I pulled my knees to my chest and let myself cry. Let the tears soak into my sleeves. Let the pain crack me open. Because there was no pretending anymore. No more excuses. No more hoping it would get better. It was over, and I didn't know who I was without him. The house settled after he went upstairs. I heard the water run, the click of the bathroom door, the soft groan of bed springs as he climbed in. And then silence. But my mind wouldn't settle with it. Archive. The word sat in my chest like something sharp. I kept turning it over, trying to make it mean nothing, trying to tell myself it was practical, efficient, the way someone files away a receipt or an old bill. But you don't archive love letters from your wife. You don't save one message like it's evidence. I stood in the hallway outside his office for a long time before I opened the door. The room smelled like him, leather and paper and that faint cologne he wore on Sundays. His desk was neat, too neat maybe. Everything in its place. Pens lined up, laptop closed, a coffee mug from 3 days ago still sitting on a coaster. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I had to look. I started with the top drawer: staplers, post its, a tangle of charging cords, nothing. The second drawer: old receipts, business cards from people I didn't recognize, a birthday card I'd given him last year still in the envelope. Still sealed. I closed it softly. The bottom drawer stuck a little when I pulled. Inside were files, tax returns, warranty papers, user manuals for appliances we didn't even own anymore. I moved them aside slowly, carefully, like I was trying not to wake something. And then I saw it: a small leather journal, dark brown, worn at the edges, the kind you'd carry in a coat pocket. I'd never seen it before. I lifted it out and sat back on the floor, my legs folded beneath me. My hands were already shaking. The leather was soft, warm almost, like it had been held often. I opened it. His handwriting, neat, deliberate, the same hand that signed birthday cards and grocery lists. But this was different. Dates, initials, locations. Coffee shop, 3 p.m., and a park bench evening. Library, noon. Page after page, dozens of them. Some of the dates were recent, some went back a year, maybe two. I traced my finger down one column, then another. The initials didn't mean anything to me, but the care and the way he'd written them did. This wasn't random, this was a record. I flipped through faster now, my breath coming short and shallow. There were notes in the margins, small, almost coded. Didn't stay long. She seemed tired. Said she missed me. I stopped on that one, read it again. She. My chest felt tight, my throat burned. I turned to the last page, and that's when I saw it. Paper clipped to the inside back cover. A folded piece of paper, printed, neat creases like it had been opened and closed many times. I pulled it free. It was an email. From Sophie. Subject: I can't do this anymore. I stared at the name. Sophie. I didn't know a Sophie. I read the message slowly, each word sinking in like stones. You said you'd leave her. You promised. I can't be your secret anymore. That was it. Short, direct, final. But it was enough. I sat there on the floor of his office, the journal open in my lap, the email trembling in my hand. The air felt thin, the walls too close. I thought about all the nights he'd worked late, the weekends he'd gone to clear his head, the way he smiled at his phone sometimes and then put it away when I walked in. I thought about the word archive, and I finally understood. He hadn't been careless. He'd been careful. I don't know how long I stayed there. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough for the tears to come. Slow at first, then all at once. I cried the way you cry when something breaks that you didn't even know was cracked. Quiet, shaking, alone. Upstairs, I heard him shift in bed. The springs creaked. I froze, listened. But he didn't get up. He didn't call my name. He just settled back into sleep. I folded the email carefully, clipped it back to the journal, placed everything back in the drawer exactly as I'd found it. I closed it softly, stood, turned off the light. When I climbed into bed beside him an hour later, he didn't stir. His breathing was deep, even, peaceful. I lay there in the dark staring at the ceiling. And I realized something. He didn't know I knew, but I couldn't unknow it. The house was quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt like the space between something ending and whatever comes after. Chapter title: The Woman Who Stayed Silent. Script: approximately 1,000 words. I found her number in the email. It was printed at the bottom beneath her name. A signature line from some corporate template. Sophie Chen, marketing consultant. I stared at it for 20 minutes before I dialed. The phone rang 3 times. I almost hung up. Then I heard her voice. Hello? Soft, cautious, like she was expecting bad news. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. She waited. Finally, I said it. Did you love him? The silence that followed felt endless. I could hear her breathing, slow, measured, like she was deciding whether to hang up or stay. She stayed. Yes. The word was quiet, almost a whisper. I closed my eyes. Did he love you? Another pause. Longer this time. I heard her shift, maybe sitting down, maybe just turning away from wherever she was standing. He said he did. Her voice cracked just a little. But I don't think Daniel knows how to love anyone. Not really. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. He just collects people. She said it slowly, like she'd thought about it 1,000 times before. Keeps them close enough to feel wanted, but far enough away that he never has to choose. I felt something break inside me. Not sudden, not loud, just a quiet crumbling, because I knew she was right. I'm sorry you're going through this, she said. Her voice was sad now. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. But leaving him was the best thing I ever did. She paused. I hope you find the courage to do the same. And then she hung up. No goodbye, just the soft click of disconnection. I sat there staring at my phone. The screen went dark. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. He just collects people. The words echoed. I thought about the journal, the initials, the dates. I thought about the archived message, about the way he smiled at me sometimes. Warm, but distant. Like I was a painting he admired but never touched. Daniel didn't love me. He loved the idea of being loved. He loved knowing I was there, that I would stay, that I wouldn't ask too many questions. I stood up slowly, walked to the window. The sky was gray, flat, the kind of day that feels like it's waiting for something. And I realized I was done waiting. Chapter title: The Message I Left Behind. Script: approximately 1,000 words. I packed the suitcase while he was at work. I didn't think about it too much. Didn't make a list or plan it out. I just opened the closet and started pulling things off hangers. Jeans, sweaters, the dress I wore to my sister's wedding, a few books from the nightstand, my grandmother's necklace, the one she gave me before she died. I left most of it behind. The furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the wall, the coffee mugs with our initials. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else now, someone I used to be. I zipped the suitcase shut and set it by the door. Then I walked into the kitchen. My wedding ring sat on my finger the way it had for 6 years. I twisted it once, twice. Then I pulled it off. It felt lighter than I expected. I set it on the counter next to the fruit bowl. The small click it made when it touched the marble sounded final. I found a pen, a piece of paper, sat down at the table, and I wrote, Daniel. I found all of them. Iris, Mara, Sophie. I don't know if there are more, and I don't want to know. My hand shook a little as I wrote, but I kept going. I deserve someone who doesn't delete me from their life, one message at a time. Don't call. Don't come looking for me. Goodbye. I didn't sign it with love. I just wrote my name. I folded the note once, placed it next to the ring, stood there looking at them both for a long time. It felt strange, like I was looking at the end of something I'd spent years building, but also like I was seeing it clearly for the first time. I picked up my suitcase, walked to the door, stopped, turned back one last time. The house was still. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. Everything looked normal, peaceful even, but I knew better now. I opened the door and stepped outside. The fog was rolling in. Thick, gray, silent. It moved slow, like it was swallowing the street one house at a time. I stood on the porch and watched it come, watched it cover the mailbox, the driveway, the front steps, and then the house. I took a breath, deep, full, and I realized something for the first time in years. I could breathe. I didn't know where I was going, didn't have a plan, didn't have answers, but I had my suitcase, I had my grandmother's necklace, and I had myself. I started walking, the fog wrapped around me like a blanket. Cool, damp, quiet. My footsteps echoed softly on the pavement. Behind me, the house disappeared, swallowed whole by the gray. I didn't look back. The road ahead was uncertain. I didn't know what came next. Didn't know where I'd sleep tonight or who I'd call tomorrow, but it didn't matter because for the first time in a long time, the road was mine, and that was enough. I kept walking, the fog followed, and somewhere behind me, a man I used to know was waking up to an empty house. But I wasn't there to see it. I was already gone.